Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's begin analyzing today's Hindu newspaper with the first article that focuses on the Indian education system, specifically the multiple reports and surveys that we keep on conducting with regard to the education levels in India. The author here is making a point that while we conduct a lot of reports, surveys, etc., including the ASA report, also the National Achievement Survey, that is the NAS, which is conducted from the government side. But the fact remains that in all these surveys, when we try to find out the education level of the kids in India, we ignore one very important stakeholder in this entire process, that is the parents, especially the parents from low income schools. Poor parents who only want their kids to get educated to make sure that they are worthy of getting a job in the future. For them, there is not a lot that is actually highlighted in this particular survey, which is conducted day in and day out. If you look at from these parents' point of views, they are not really concerned with the infrastructure of the schools. They are not really concerned about how big the school is, how big the playground is, are the teachers speaking in English or not. What they are really concerned with is whether or not their child can get to learn English, whether or not their child can get to learn math, so that in the future they can get a better job as compared to what the parents have right now. That is the only requirement that they have. And unfortunately, as per the author, our schools, the education system, and even the surveys that we conduct to find out their levels does not include that particular parameter which these parents are looking for. The author suggests that the school education system should be left in the hands of the local administration, because it is the local administration that is approachable to these parents who belong to the lower section of the society. For them to reach the lower administration to suggest certain improvements is still approachable and it's still possible. But when the decision making about the schools and the education system is done at the national level or even at the state level, it goes beyond any feedback that is given to them by these parents at the local level. The education policy that we have, as per the author, should focus on learning and personality development of migrant children as well. We usually talk a lot about the people who leave India, go to other countries to earn a better livelihood, but unfortunately, we don't discuss so much about the local migrants that we have. The domestic laborers who go from one state to the other state to have a better life, to earn more money. These migrant workers are a huge population in India, and their children usually go to the government schools where these parents expect them to have a good education. In these particular classrooms, as per the author, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that we have good personality development, that we have a vision for education so that their future is much more secured. In such schools specifically, it should be the district that should be the decision making authority. National level programs such as the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, etc., have not been able to run very well because they have been controlled from the central government level. If we really have to ensure that these programs run well at the ground level, the local administration has to be given the charge of running these programs. If you are familiar with the RTE, that is a right to education, it had a lot of provisions. One of the provisions in the RTE that people don't really talk about is the concept of School Management Committee, called the SMC. Now, the logic of SMC was that important decisions about the school should be taken after consulting the parents also. So, the logic was that in every school there would be a committee which will have as members some people from the parent side also who will be representing the parents, and some people from the school side also. And that committee together would take important decisions about the school, be it the infrastructure, the investment, the curriculum, etc. But the reality is, in most of the schools, especially in these government schools or low income schools, we do not see these kind of committees. And because we don't see these kind of committees, the role of parents in how the school would run and in how the school would be administered is almost close to zero, which needs to change as per the author. One other point of view that the author is making here is, whenever you talk about these kind of surveys, be it the ASA report that is conducted by Pratham NGO, be it the NAS, we usually focus only on the learning skills in terms of English language and in terms of maths. For example, a lot of times you see these kind of news in the newspaper that so many children in class 8 can't do a simple addition or subtraction, or so many children in class 5 can't read simple words. So we focus a lot on maths and English, and we don't really focus on other subjects. For example, history also is as important as the other subjects. Geography, economics, all these are as important as English and maths. Yes, English and maths may be important for foundational literacy, but the point is that these surveys don't even focus on skills and knowledge in other subjects, which is something that we should think about. We should also educate these parents. Yes, for them, learning English and being competent in the English language takes the highest priority. But the fact is that if you have to ensure holistic education to the children, you have to give them much more than English and maths, and this is what is lacking right now. Now, as I discussed earlier, the article mentions two kinds of surveys that are conducted. First is the ASA, that is Annual Survey of Education Report, which is discussed multiple times. This is published by a well-known NGO called Pratham. But apart from that, we also have one more assessment done from the government side, which is called the National Achievement Survey. This is conducted by the Ministry of Education, which recently released its 2021 report about this survey. Under this survey, the CBSE wanted to find out the learning outcomes and the health of our education system. And the outcomes that we received were extremely disappointing. The information in the survey was collected on a lot of parameters, including the school environment, the teaching processes, student home and background factors, etc. This survey was conducted in 22 languages to ensure that as many people as possible should participate. The survey had three different levels: grade 3 and grade 5, grade 8 and grade 10. Let me share with you certain findings of this particular survey from the government. The national average percentage of students for class 3rd was 59%, which declined to 49% in class 5th. Also, in mathematics, the score nationally was 57% in class 3 and only 44% in class 5, which reduced even further in class 8th and in class 10th. So a decline in the score was seen in almost all the subjects as you go higher in the classes. As expected, the average performance of schools in the rural areas was much lower as compared to those as we saw in the urban areas. In terms of class-wise divide also, we saw that the performance of students from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe background was lower as compared to students from the general category, which is also a cause of concern. The good news came from the gender data, as per which the average performance of girls was much better as compared to the boys in almost all the subjects. In terms of different states, Kerala, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Punjab performed much better than the national average. Delhi's performance, specifically in class 8th and class 10th, was much better as compared to the national average. These were the important findings from the National Achievement Survey 2021 conducted by the Ministry of Education. This is a snapshot of the same survey that we discussed, where it talks about how the different states performed in different subjects depending upon the different grades that we had. The next article that we have here is written because 31st of May is a World No Tobacco Day, as is being observed by the WHO since 1987. And that is why this article is written here. This article says that tobacco has a lot of negative impact not just on the health of the individual, but it has much larger consequences. See, the point is, whenever we talk about tobacco and the negative consequences of tobacco, the first and mostly the last point that we always have is the health consequences. Yes, it is very detrimental to the human health. It cuts short the human life, and multiple studies have suggested that. However, the authors here are pointing out that because the health related problem is so big with respect to tobacco, that we tend to ignore the other negative aspects. Let me give you a few examples. WHO says that 600 million trees were chopped down annually just to make cigarettes, and 84 million tons of CO2 emissions are released in the atmosphere just due to the cigarette smokers. Also, 22 billion liters of water was used to make cigarettes worldwide. Just goes to show that cigarette and tobacco do not just have an impact on individuals' health, it has an impact on the entire society. So, for example, if I am a non smoker, if I don't consume tobacco in any form, that doesn't mean that cigarettes and tobacco are not harming me, because I am also living in the same environment as the smokers are. So if due to the smokers a lot of trees are being chopped down, or due to the smokers there's a lot of CO2 emissions, that means it is impacting my body also. So the smokers can't say that allow me to smoke cigarette because I'm impacting myself, because that is not the case. By smoking cigarette and by buying tobacco, you are impacting the health of the overall society, which is what the policy makers have to keep in mind. As per the second global adult tobacco survey, about 28.6% adults in India used tobacco in 2016-17. Now, this tobacco includes cigarette, BDs, other forms of smoking. It also includes the tobacco that you chew day in and day out. And that is why India has the largest number of people who consume tobacco just next to China. Now, a lot of people say, why don't we just outright ban tobacco? Now, we can't do that because of various reasons. Number one, you have to give liberty to the people to make their own choices. Secondly, it also brings a lot of taxes for the government of India, who can impose lot higher taxes on tobacco as compared to other products. Thirdly, tobacco at the end of the day is grown in farms. So there are a lot of farmers who are dependent on tobacco for their livelihood. So if you outright ban tobacco, this means that you are taking away the livelihood of thousands and lakhs of those farmers who are working in the tobacco fields. So all of that has to be considered before the government takes any big step in this particular direction. The estimate is that around 6 million farmers, that is 60 lakh, and 2 crore farm laborers actually work in tobacco farming in India. So any big policy action can have a negative impact on their livelihood as well. Now, there are a lot of solutions based on what we see around the world. There are market based solutions. For example, you can incentivize reduction of deforestation through the use of the concept of carbon credits that is so famous around the world, under which you encourage the industries around the world to reduce their carbon emissions and then they can trade the same in the market. A lot of big companies around the world, including Amazon, Unilever, Nestle, etc., are pledging to cut down their emissions and have pledged $50 billion of investment in this regard. The article here mentions that one of the largest cigarette companies in the world also realized this and began a transition to force its customers from tobacco to smoke free products. Now, although the article does not give you the name of the company, but let me tell you, the company that the authors here are talking about is Philip Morris International, that is of US. The company has set a goal by 2025 to get at least 40 million of its adult customers to stop smoking and switch to one of the alternatives, with the goal of achieving a smoke free future. So it is not that the companies around the world are not taking initiatives in this regard. They are, but at the end of the day, to find initiatives where they can still preserve their profit is not an easy thing to do. Now, this is how the WHO website looks today. When you go to the WHO website on the page of the World No Tobacco Day, this is how they are celebrating it. As I said, they are bringing focus on the fact that a lot of deforestation around the world is also related to tobacco and tobacco consumption around the world. Now, let me give you a brief insight about how tobacco consumption looks like in India specifically. There are about 27 crore people in India above the age of 15 years who actually consume tobacco in some form or the other. The situation is so bad that our annual economic burden of tobacco is about 1,77,000 crore. Now, when you say annual economic burden, that means if you consume tobacco, you fall ill and then you're not able to work. Additionally, you also have to spend money on your own healthcare because of tobacco diseases. All that becomes an economic burden. I'm sure all of you remember when you go and see a movie, there is that infomercial that is showed at the beginning of the movie talking about how tobacco is actually bad for your health. But still, the number of tobacco consumers in India are extremely high. About 27% of all the cancers in India are actually related to the tobacco usage. And that is why the problem in India is huge and needs to be contained. Now, the one idea that has followed around the world with a lot of success is increasing taxes on tobacco. Now, taxes on products such as tobacco, liquor, etc. is called sin tax. These can be taxes that can be imposed at a very high rate. It will have two consequences. Number one, if people still want to buy it, they will be giving a lot more money to the government, so they are earning. Secondly, if it does become too expensive to be affordable, even then it is for the benefit of the society because people will then stop consuming tobacco in such large numbers. This idea has been adopted around the world, where there have been successful examples of how high taxes have actually discouraged people from consuming tobacco. So the question is, if this is such a simple idea, has it worked in India or not? Unfortunately, the taxes that we have on tobacco are still on the much lower level as compared to what we see around the world. In fact, ever since GST has come into being, there has not been any major increase in the tax burden on the tobacco products. There was just a minor increase in the national calamity contingent duty during the union budget of 2020-21. However, after that, there has not been an increase in the tobacco products, and they are still very affordable. The other problem is that a lot of people who consume this belong to the poor section of the society. So when they fall ill, they don't really have any backup to treat themselves. They don't really have a lot of backup to get themselves treated. In most cases, they are the lone earning member of the society, so it impacts them even more. Apart from raising taxes, one other thing that has been taken up by many nations is to increase the minimum age of tobacco consumption. We have nations such as Honduras, Japan, Mongolia, Philippines, Thailand, etc., who have increased the minimum age to 21 to consume tobacco. Right now in India, the minimum age to have tobacco is 18. Many people suggest that this should be increased to at least 21, if not more. But again, this is a tricky situation for the government as well. As I said earlier, tobacco and these kind of products bring in a lot of revenue to the government in form of taxes. And secondly, the livelihood of a lot of farmers is dependent on it. So any decision by the government that cuts down on the sales of tobacco in large numbers would be detrimental to both the government and the farmers as well. The next article that we have here is on the problem of coal that is just not going away. In fact, it has been almost more than a year since we have been reading about the fact that there is a shortage of coal in India and the power crisis in India is just getting worse day by day. The reason why this article is written is there is nothing new that has happened, just that the finance minister recently made a statement that our plans of transitioning away from coal to better resources of power such as natural gas, etc., will now be delayed because of the Ukraine Russia crisis. As we know, because of the Ukraine Russia crisis, prices of natural gas around the world have spiked remarkably, and that is why our plans of transitioning away from coal have actually hit a roadblock because of this. The article here says that about 80% of the world's energy is still coming from coal, natural gas, and oil. With coal being the largest source of energy around the world, especially in India, with around 70 to 75% of our energy even today coming from coal only. And we are all well aware of the harmful impact of coal. The emissions that coal actually results in, all the carbon residue that it results in, it is very detrimental to our health. But the problem is that we don't have a ready-made alternative for this. For all the talks about the renewable energy such as solar, wind, etc., the fact remains that the most reliable source of energy and the cheapest source of energy right now still remains coal. And that is why it is very difficult for developing nations such as India to transition away from coal in the short run. The article says that till Feb 2022, the total installed capacity for coal-based power generation in India was about 51.5%, while natural gas only made up 6.3%. Coal is seen as much more inexpensive as compared to the source of energy and much more reliable as well. Because with renewable source of energy, for solar for example, for wind for example, you're a lot dependent on the nature. If there is no wind, there is no wind energy. If there is no sun, there is no solar energy. You can't manufacture it out of your own. Coal, however, can give you power 24/7, and that is why it is much more reliable. Our plans of transitioning away from coal have been hit majorly due to the increase in prices of natural gas. For example, the natural gas prices were very high even before the Russia-Ukraine conflict had started. But now they have become even higher. On May 2022, the natural gas price in the international market was 1425 as compared to just 500 rupees in April 2021. So in 13 months, the prices have become almost threefold in the international market, and that is why it is just not feasible for India to ditch the coal completely and take up natural gas transition. One other problem that we have with renewable energy, which we don't really discuss a lot, is the storage issue. Now, for example, in the daytime, you can have a lot of solar energy generation, but then you need to store that energy, use it in the night, or store that energy and transition it to those places which don't have a lot of sunlight. That means storage of this energy that is coming from the renewable sources such as solar and wind becomes a major problem. And that is why not just in India but around the world we are seeing that many companies and countries are dealing with this problem, and a lot of research is going on as to how can we store this energy in a cheap manner, because just building batteries and cells after cells is going to be a very expensive affair, and this cannot be done throughout the world in such a scale that we can actually solve the energy problem. So the storage issue still remains unresolved at a large scale. Also, after the pandemic, the demand for power around the world has increased considerably. Maybe the policymakers in India did not expect this and they were not really prepared with this much demand, and thus there is a shortage of coal that we are seeing around the world right now. So much so that even Coal India, which is the largest producer of coal in India, has to import coal after many years, which indicates how bad the situation is right now. And as I said earlier, the unfortunate part is that this is not a problem that has just come up. We have been reading these kind of articles and these kind of debates since over 1 year now. And this power crisis problem and the coal shortage problem is just not going away. Means somewhere down the line, we are not as prepared for our coal supply as we should have been. This report about how much coal stocks do we have in our power plants around the country is very concerning. As you can see, there are a lot of power plants in India that have coal for just 1 or 2 days, after which they would have to shut down because they won't have enough coal to function after that. And the situation is not great in most of the power plants in India right now. Because of this, if you remember a few days back, there was a news that the government of India has even stopped railway services on a lot of networks. A lot of trains which did not used to carry a lot of people were actually cancelled or shut down for some time because of this coal shortage. All of that still exists, and the situation is just not getting any better, majorly because there is a competition amongst the countries to buy coal as well. If we are trying to buy coal from some other nation, let's say Russia, then there are other countries as well in line which are ready to pay a higher price than us, such as China. And that is why the problem is not as easy to resolve as you might imagine. The next article that we have is actually based on a research paper written in the US recently. So the US government actually has a law called the FCPA. This FCPA stands for Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. In simple terms, this law is that no US company or the US citizen can actually give bribe to any public official in the foreign nation. So earlier, if any US individual or a company used to give bribe in a foreign nation such as, let's say, China or Nepal or India, they would say that no, we are not covered under the US law, so we have not broken any law. That is why the US government passed this law called the FCPA, under which you can't even give a bribe to a foreign public official as well. Now, the research paper that has recently come out has said that because of this particular law, the opposite has happened, meaning that the US government had expected after the passing of this law, the government's revenue will increase, there would be much lesser corruption, and there would be no bribes now given in the foreign nations. However, as per the research paper, what has happened is it has actually led to an increase in the black market. Because now that the public officials know they can't take a bribe because it is not allowed under the US law and they would be caught, now they are taking bribe in an illegal manner in the black market. And that is how they are earning even more money. The research paper thus shows that whenever any government tries to pass any strict anti-corruption law, it actually has a negative impact and it leads to an increase in the black market transactions, thus not really giving any benefit to the government or to the government exchequer. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say there is a company that wants to sell alcohol. So they go to any public official which is in the power and they ask the public official to give them the permission. Now the public official would have given them the permission if he would have received a bribe. But now under this law, because he can't receive a bribe, he says that no, I will not give you the permission. In place of that, the public official actually allows people to sell liquor illegally. So that on every liquor sale illegally, he will get a commission of, let's say, 5% or 10%. That is what is happening right now. Earlier, because a public official used to take a bribe and then they used to give the license, the things were at least in order. But now, because they are not taking a bribe and they think that they will be caught, now they are letting the illegal market run in a much, much bigger manner. You can see this in India as well. There are a lot of states in India, for example, Bihar, Gujarat, which have banned liquor. However, if you talk to people who are actually living in those areas, and you can see those in the interviews as well, that is not very difficult to get hold of liquor in those states if you are ready to pay a price which is higher as compared to the original price. So what is happening is, people should have gotten liquor anyways at the MRP. Now they have to pay a higher price because it includes the price of the illegal black market as well. So anti-corruption laws or strict laws always have a negative consequence as well, as has been shown in this particular research paper. This is what this article is about. Now, obviously, you are giving the UPSC exam and you're not giving the American Public Service exam, so you don't have to read about the FCPA in detail. But this is just a general hypothesis that has been proven, that if the government passes such an anti-corruption law, it will lead to an increased activity in the black market. So this gives us a chance to see where and how does India stand in terms of corruption. Now, as you know, whenever you talk about corruption, the one report internationally that is renowned is the Corruption Perception Index, that is the CPI, which ranks the nations across the world in terms of corruption. Now, as you can see in the 2021 report, which is the latest report to have come out, the nations at the top are Denmark, Finland, New Zealand, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, etc. The usual countries that you do expect to be high up there. And when you look at India, over here, India is ranked at 85th place in 180 nations around the world. The higher the score, the better it is. India's score is 4040 as compared to the top nations, which have scores in the vicinity of 88, 85, 86, etc. Now, if you want to compare India to how the other nations are doing in South Asia in terms of our neighbor, you can see this. India's position, or the number of marks that we actually achieved in terms of corruption, have increased as compared to the past few years. In 2012, the points that we got were 36. In 2021, it increased to 40. In our neighborhood, the country which has the highest marks is China with 45. Then there are other nations such as Sri Lanka, whose situation has become worse. They have jumped from 40 to 37. Then we have nations such as Afghanistan right at the bottom, which are some of the most corrupt nations in the world. The next article that we have is the Prime Minister Modi's meeting with the COVID orphans. That is some of the children who unfortunately lost their parents or the primary caregiver in the COVID-19 pandemic. As per the article, about 4,439 children were approved under the PM CARES benefit for COVID orphans scheme. Now, the government had announced this scheme long time back, under which children who lost both their parents or the primary caregiver between March 11, 2020 and Feb 28, 2022 will be eligible to get benefits under the scheme. As per the scheme, the government would give 10 lakh rupees when the children turn 23 years old, and between the age of 18 and 23 they will get a monthly stipend from the government side. They will also be given free of cost education from the government side. The children will receive free education, textbooks and uniforms in the nearest government school. If they want to go to a private school, they can also get their fees reimbursed from the government. The students are also allowed to take loans for professional courses and for higher education under this particular scheme. Now, this is not a newly announced scheme. This is an old scheme which was announced earlier by the government. The reason why it is in the news is that the Prime Minister Modi has released these benefits under this scheme for the children now. This is a short screenshot if you have to remember the important provisions of this particular scheme. As I said, children to get a monthly stipend once they turn 18 and a fund of 10 lakh rupees once they turn 23. Free education. Children will also get higher education loans and PM CARE will pay the interest on those loans. These children will also get free health insurance of 5 lakh rupees under Ayushman Bharat till 18 years, and the premium will be paid by PM CARES fund. There are some other schemes also which were launched by the Government of India, especially for children who were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, there is a Bal Swaraj COVID Care. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights specifically has made this online portal which is called the Bal Swaraj portal. This is specifically for children who need care and protection because they don't have any elderly to look after them. We also have the Pradhan Mantri E-Vidya, which is an initiative to provide digital and online education to children across the country. It is launched under One Nation, One Digital platform, and the objective is to protect the education of children during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also had the Manodarpan, which is to provide psychological support to students and the family members and the stress they have been facing during the COVID-19 pandemic. These are all the important articles and initiatives that we had to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, despite all the hype around renewable sources of energy, they are still long way away from being a credible alternative to coal. Comment. Second, tobacco consumption is at the root of multiple issues: health, economic, and even environment. Elaborate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. As you know, you can write the answers to these questions and comment on the BYJU'S portal, the link for which is given in the description of the video. Go to that portal, leave your answers. You can check the answers of other aspirants also, give feedback to each other, and learn from each other's mistakes to make sure that your answer writing skills become even better with every passing day. Thank you so much for watching the video.